So we've been talking in March about growth, and today's theme is moving on. Because when we're growing, we're usually leaving something behind, yes? So my intention is that what we leave behind today, for me at least, is judgment. Judgment. So speaking of judging, because it's St. Patrick's Day, I have an Irish joke for you. I've got one. A surgeon, an engineer, and an Irish politician were having a discussion. And the only reason he's Irish is because it's St. Paddy's Day. And they were having a discussion about their professions and the relative importance of their professions, and which is the most established and therefore the most important profession. And so the surgeon said, well, the Bible says that Eve was carved from Adam's ribs. Surely that was a surgical procedure. So a surgeon was the first profession and therefore the most important. Then the engineer said, yes, but long before Adam and Eve were created, order was created out of the chaos. Now that's an engineering job. The Irishman says, sure, and who do you think created the chaos? So now apologies to my Irish friends. In principle, I don't like generalizing anything, because that's a judgment, isn't it? But I also have a judgment that laughter is a very good thing to do, so I'm sure the Irish won't mind today. But that's an interesting point about who created the chaos. That order was created out of the chaos. Order was created out of the chaos. And that's a really, really important thing that's got to do with what we teach here about how we do spiritual mind treatment, because that's what our spiritual mind treatment is about, is finding the order in the chaos. It's looking past the appearance of whatever the chaos is showing up in our lives and knowing there's order in there. Because chaos is only order that hasn't got itself in order yet. It's infinite potential. It's everything that can be all swirling about there waiting to be something. That's what chaos is. All the same stuff that order is, only it just hasn't been shaped into a box yet or put into form yet. So chaos is a really, really good thing. It contains within it all the seeds of anything we could ever want to manifest. And it's a necessary step to get where we're going. You know, everything does come out of the chaos. It has to be there. So we can connect with that little joke today because of the chaos, and also because of the fact that it was a politician we're talking about. Because we all have judgments about politicians, don't we? Anybody have a judgment about politicians? How about lawyers, doctors, men, women, white people, black people, native people, Muslims, you know, all of it? We've all got judgments, because the minute we categorize anybody into a group, we've made a judgment about them, haven't we? And sometimes it's just observing facts. Terry's a woman. That's not a judgment, that's a fact. But, well, sometimes there's judgments about what that means, right? And then there's some very nebulous things, too. We can say, well, he's greedy. She's selfish. She's crabby. Those might be facts, too, but they're even more judgments, right? So every time we attach a label to anything, we're judging it. We label things, and then we decide whether the label's a good one or a bad one. You know, because to me, tall might be a negative label. To you, it's a positive label, right? So we're always judging all this stuff. I have a friend, he talks a lot. And he talks about himself a lot. And he's a very dear friend. But he had met another friend of mine, and they were in conversation, and he said to me, I didn't like her very much. She sure likes to talk, but she doesn't like to listen. And I know her. She does have a couple of causes she goes on about. So I said, well, I can imagine. What was she talking about? And he said, I don't know. I wasn't listening. You know, how indicative is that? We judge, there, but for the grace of God for I. And again, that's at our teaching too, is that whatever we're seeing out there is mirroring back to us what's in here. So if I feel like people are judging me all the time, I have to take a look and see how judgmental I'm being. It's too easy, isn't it? So, I'm not all that impressed with, you know how we were supposed to be? Remember how we were going to turn out? When I was in college, I was in nurses training, and you had a bunch of 18-year-old females, and we do all this romantic kind of dreaming about our lives and what they were going to be. And I was going to be a perfect mother. And to me, being a perfect mother at that time meant always having homemade cookies in the cookie jar. Since learned that there's a little more to it than that. But we had this picture of how we were going to turn out, happily ever after, all that good stuff, right? And we all wanted that. We all wanted that, but the older I get, the less impressed I am with people who turned out the way we were supposed to turn out. My college roommate did. She'd been married still for the same guy, and her kids all went to university and never were a moment's trouble that you'd know of. She has a big house, and the Christmas letters, because we all wanted our kids to go to school and behave themselves, right? And get good grades, and then graduate, and then get good jobs, and get married, and have smart, beautiful, intelligent children, and then they write Christmas letters to me. And I'm starting to find that a little boring, because I don't find it that interesting to talk to people about all the stuff they have. What I find it interesting to talk to people about is the mistakes they made. And what they learned from making those mistakes. Because I know that's what makes me interesting. So I find myself judging people about how interesting they are, how useful they are, what purpose their lives might hold, whether they've lived up to that purpose or not. I have all those things going around in my mind, and I have to keep reminding myself that there's only one manifestation of life, that it matters at all whether I understand it or approve of it or not, and that's mine. And everybody else has to approve their own manifestation of life. None of it's any of my business except what happens over here. So you've all heard that biblical injunction. Judge not. I got to read it right. Judge not, that ye be not judged. For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged. However much judging you do, that's how much is going to come back to you. Whatever's the intention in your judging, that's what's coming back to you. That's the law of cause and effect. That's what it is. Now, this doesn't mean that the divinity is a big old man with a big white beard sitting on a chair with a tablet and a notebook, and as Louise Hay says, one eye on your genitals, keeping track of everything you're doing and writing a list of your mistakes so that you've got ammunition to send you to burn in hell forever. That's not it at all. That's not the judgment, because sorry, I just threw that in. She did say that. I heard her say that. So it's just that each and every act brings about its own consequence, its own result, right? That's how we educate our kids these days. Hopefully. It's not the punishment thing. It's just letting them experience the natural consequences of the choices they make. And that's how God punishes us or judges us, if you will. It's the natural result. And I prefer to use the more neutral form, consequence, because that takes the judgment out of it. If I do such and such, this is likely to happen. If I do that, that's likely to happen. Just a natural consequence. So there's no need for me to judge you or you to judge me or anybody to judge anybody else, because life is taking care of that. Just in the natural unfolding of life, creating its own consequences, God's got that covered, thanks. We don't have to do that. Every day, we're creating our own consequences. Call it punishment, if you will, call it reward, if you will. Every day, not just when we die, every day we are experiencing the result of what we have thought and what we have done in the past. John Ruskin writes, "Every day is a day of judgment, and writes its irrevocable verdict in the flame of its west. Think you that judgment waits till the doors of the graves are opened? It waits at the doors of your homes. It waits at the corners of your streets. We are in the midst of judgment. Natural consequence, law of cause and effect. We are in it. So judgment is merely the law of cause and effect is operating right here. Everything we see here is an effect of a cause. And cause is always mind. Cause is always mind. That's our teaching. Because we teach that thought is a creative power. In fact, thought is the creative power. And every thought we think is doing something to set the universe in motion. And the universe is non-judgmental about it. It just follows our thought orders over and over again. So, the universe doesn't judge us. We judge ourselves and each other constantly. The universe plays no favorites. The universe holds nothing against anybody. You know, he maketh his rain to rain on the just and the unjust. You know, rain just rains, sun just shines. God just loves. And the law and effect just takes effect. So punishment and reward are automatic reactions of the law. We could call that karma. Ernest Holmes says karma is the law that binds the ignorant and frees the wise. Simply the law of cause and effect. So if you know that you're creating your own effects in life, then you become free, don't you? That's the truth that sets us free. We know that we're creating our own effects. And Holmes says that karma is the subjective law of tendency set in motion by the individual, the mental law acting through him. Karmic law is the use that man makes of his mentality. And he's very careful to point out that by karma he doesn't mean kismet or fate. You know, that's foreordained, that's just my karma, nothing I can do about it. Karma can be changed. We do not recognize karma as inevitable retribution. We know that life is an effect of which mind is cause. We know that any time we can change our thinking, change our lives. So karma means the mental tendency towards something. And we create that tendency all the time with our thinking. Again, Holmes says, when peace, harmony, and love rule in our thinking, we know they will register in our lives as effect, bringing health, happiness, and prosperity. Any previous karma different from that will be set at naught. Karma is not cast in stone. It can be neutralized. Change your thinking, change your life. So yes, whatever we do, we are creating a reality, and that can be changed in this magic moment of now by changing our thinking. So karma is both collective and individual. So we each have an individual karma. This group of people sitting here has a collective karma. The people who use this building have a consciousness. The people who live in this city, we have a karma or a consciousness. And Canadians, those of us who call ourselves Canadians, collectively we've created something. You know, when you go to travel to different cities, they have a different feel. Some of you just love this city, and others, you get me out of here. We've all created that, and even if I've never been to that city, Venice, I have been to Venice. I've never been to Sydney, Australia. Now I can say Venice is wonderful because I've been there, and every time I say that, it adds to the wonderfulness of Venice. Right? I've never been to Sydney, Australia, but I can still think thoughts about it, and it's going to add to the collective consciousness of what Sydney, Australia is, because we're all tapped in to that universal mind. So every judgment is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if I tell myself for 10 years that Sydney, Australia is a fabulous place to go to, you can bet when I go there, I'm going to experience it as fabulous. Now, if, on the other hand, if I spend 10 years saying what a dump it is, what am I going to experience? We tend to find what we're looking for. Ever notice that? There's an inscription on the tomb of Pope Adrian VI. It says, "Alas, to judge a man of even the highest virtue, it is necessary to know the time in which he lived." Now, Pope Adrian was ineffectual as a pope. because he was a revolutionary and a reformer, and he tried to reduce the corruption and introduce reforms, and those in power were not ready for that. So he was seen as a bit of a problem, a bit of a troublemaker in those days. And historically, he becomes a hero. Look at the things that we do today that 200 years ago would have made us incredible sinners, particularly around our sexuality. Ask Louise Hay, right? But look at the things that we did 200 years ago that are abhorrent today. We had racial prejudice, we had gender discrimination, we had slavery. As our consciousness changes as a collective, we progress, we're evolving. And that's happening with each of us as individuals too. And we each get to say how fast we're spiraling up that spiral. So just as society's judgments change over time, so do ours. When we're conscious, when we take the time to look at what it is we're saying, to look at what it is we're believing. See, if we don't even know we're believing something, we're at the effect totally. But if we know, I believe this, I have this judgment, and I choose to change it, now I'm no longer at effect. But judgment isn't all bad, you know. Sometimes we judge ourselves a little harshly. Gerald Jampolsky, who wrote, Do I Have to Give Up Me to Be Loved by You, and I think Teach Only Peace, he tells about a time when he was running in Hawaii, and it was a gorgeous, glorious day, and the sky was blue, and the ocean was blue, and the grass was green. And he was just blitzed out doing affirmations and jogging along in this beautiful, beautiful countryside until he saw a beer can that had been discarded, carelessly on one of the Gulf Greens. And he started making judgments about that and getting a little pissed off about that, a little angry about that. And then suddenly he realized he was remembering things when he had carelessly thrown things out the car window. And maybe he'd been a little careless, and he noticed that his running wasn't easy anymore, that he was all tensed up and he was struggling, and his mind wasn't blissed out anymore. So he went inside and he asked, whatever he called it, divine mind, what do I do? And he instantly knew, his inner teacher said, you have to go back and you have to pick up the offending beer can. It's not your beer can, but it's your beer can. You know what I mean? Because we're all in this together. So, have anybody ever thrown anything out the car window? So next time we see something that somebody else has thrown out the car window, instead of judging them, let's take corrective action. Let's take correct. And wouldn't that work a lot better if we all did that? So, I'm almost done here. Oh, yes. When I was a teenager, and this has been an interesting experience for me thinking about this too, I've always considered my father a very judgmental and critical person, and he was. Do you notice I do nothing but judge and criticize my father? I do. But when I was a teenager, my father would say something, whatever he would bawl me out for, and I would do that, well, I'm sorry thing. And he would say, don't be sorry, just don't do it again. And it suddenly dawned on me that my father was a wise man. At least sometimes. Don't be sorry, just don't do it again. What good advice that was. So, what's the filter that I'm listening to things through? And the filter is, okay, my early childhood criticizing, my experience was my father was always criticizing him. So until the day he died, I expected that from my father. Kind of look forward to a time when I can talk to him again and listen to his wisdom. So, another biblical... Oh, I have a quick question for you. Why do we wear shamrocks on St. Paddy's Day? Because real rocks are too heavy. Here's another. What's Irish and stays out all night?
So I go ahead.
Patio furniture. So, okay, here's another thing from the Bible. Judge not by appearances. So what does that mean? Look a little deeper. Look to the inside. Walk the mile in another man's moccasins. Don't be so quick to judge by appearances and to look to see what's underneath that. And that sums up our teaching here. Again, that's what our practitioners do when they do prayer treatment or spiritual mind treatment for you, is they look underneath. They don't judge by appearances. They don't judge by how sick or tired or poor you look. They judge by the truth, the abundance and the health and the joy and the naturalness of who you are, of what you really are. They're just here to remind you. That's all. And that's what our peace comes. So within the symptoms, within the circumstances, is the peace, is the contentment, is the abundance, and is the joy. So one more for you. There was an elderly man living in Ireland, and he was living alone because his only son was in Longcash prison. And it came springtime, and the man, his back was bothering him, so he wrote to his son in prison. He said, "I can't dig up my garden." His whining, "What can I do?" And the son wrote back, "For God's sake, you can't dig up a garden. That's where I buried the guns." At 4 o'clock the next morning, a dozen British soldiers showed up and dug up his gardens. Plant potatoes. Life gives you lemonade, make lemonade. They become plant potatoes. So let us remember that every day is Judgment Day. That the universe, divine mind, is returning to us what we put into it. Non-judgmentally and irrevocably. That's just what it does. That's the way the universe works. So leave the universe to judgment, and let's come to realize that cause and effect is what's running our lives. And when we do find ourselves judging, let's forgive ourselves. Just bring it up to awareness, say thank you for sharing, and move on. Because there's no point in making ourselves feel guilty. That's only going to add to it. And let's forgive others, when they judge us. For we know not what they do. We know not what they're learning. We know not what their experience is with their God, what their agreement with their God might be. So bless them. They're doing the best they know. Namaste.
Namaste.